welcome back. In today's video, we'll be painting up this large lot of orcs. This is the Armageddon set ×2, plus a combat patrol, bunch of vehicles, a whole lot of stuff. There's a stomper in here. We got a lot to paint today. The goal here was to put together a pretty simple color scheme. I wanted to do a kind of junkyard speed freak speedster scheme, so red, because red goes faster. And yeah, pretty simple. Just gonna paint up some orcs and do some different techniques and some texturing work on the armor to make them pop a little bit off the table, and get some nice high contrast between the green skin and the red armor. That's the goal, at least. Didn't do a whole lot of kit bashing here. I thought these models are really nice coming out of the box, the sculpts and all, so we're pretty much just rocking and rolling. I do have two prints. I printed out the O14, which is a jet fighter, which is pretty cool, and I also printed out the Orka's plane, which has a ton of different options for customization. So the only two things I printed for this job. Before we jump in, just a reminder, like, subscribe, share if you like the video. Also started streaming. You'll actually see some content in this video from some of my test streams I've been doing. Come on by, check it out if you want. Just basically talking painting, walking through some other painting techniques. Pretty chill. Pretty much I'm painting anyway, so I might as well turn the camera on. Alright, let's jump into the video. Alright, so pretty much off the bat here, I just wanted to start off with prime models. So what I did was I mixed in Vallejo black surface primer with a dark green, and that was my base coat for the models. And then what I basically came in after was I used basically my airbrush, and I used Vallejo lime green, and I based pretty much all the skin. Didn't really matter about overspray here. I'm just shooting arms, heads, and I'm slowly building up color that way. After my first shot of the lime green, I used lime green mixed with some forest green to do a highlight on top of this. I used my more precise highline Iwata airbrush, and I shot kind of the tops of the cylinders, the musculature, hitting some general nice gradient highlights on all the muscles and the green skin. The goal here was to have a nice high contrast green skin, so going kind of from this dark green up to lime up to a very yellowish green is going to give me that high contrast and really have them pop off the table. Since we still have the airbrush out, I might as well just go to the next color. So basically what I did here was I covered anything that wasn't green skin. I tried to be as tight as I could, and I did a mix of ice yellow and yellow green. It's kind of the same spectrum of the skin, but I really want to just have a base coat because I'm going to be using contrast paints to be cutting in a lot of these other details. So this was just a foundation for those other colors. You could do this in a white, a gray, whatever. I just had the colors on the table. Next we go to the brush. Pretty simple here, just using some contrast paints. I'm using Sand Golem. Using Sand Golem for the pants, leather, hardened leather for any leather details, some snake bite in there too. Basic browns, beiges. Orcs don't have access to the greatest colors, so plus we also don't want to take too much away from the other components here, especially the skin. We worked hard on that, so we don't want to take it away. We're really just using a #1 brush here, just cutting in where it needs to be cut in, and being precise about what colors we hit. basically while I'm here, before I start doing anything else, I just wanted to cut in some of the banners and stuff. So we're building up with a carmine red, which is almost a corn red from Vallejo, and then using a pure red, which is a pretty mid-tone red, really quickly, just give some highlights to any red fabrics I want. They're fast, they need red. That's what my orcs are. So instead of using a liquid metallic like I usually use, like a Vallejo metal range, what I wanted to do actually was first come in and highlight any of my metallic objects with some white ink. So I wanted to give them some bursts, kind of like a non-metallic highlight, but not really. It's in the middle somewhere, just giving highlights to the areas. While I'm here, I'm highlighting a lot of the other textures that I had on the model. So my leathers, my cloths. I'm really not doing the skin too much. The skin already has its highlights, so I'm trying to not hit the skin the best I can. And what that leads us into is that anything that we just did a metallic, it's going to get covered in a rattling grime. Rattling grime is contrast paint from Citadel. It's fantastic. It's like a black brown. It really, when it dries, it gives this like dirty metallic look, especially since we just did this highlight over all this work. Pair that with a nice dry brushing of a steel or a lead belcher, and you have a very nice metallic that didn't really, take too long to work on. Pretty much after we're doing all this dry brushing, we might as well hit the rest of the metallics. So I want to use a bronze on any bullets. I'm also going to use bronze for some of the emblems on these models. Nothing crazy here. There's not a ton of emblems on the orcs, but I'm going to use bronze for that. I have a copper and a brass for any other like miscellaneous parts and machinery. There's some of these orcs I have are from an older combat patrol that have more machinery on them. So that's where I'm using those coppers and that's brass. Basically going to hit some other details while we're here. So I'm using blue for my ultramarine heads for the trophies, and of course there's little squigs all over these guys. So I'm just keeping the squigs and my missile tops. I'm all using the same kind of like pure red that I used before. Keep it simple, not too many different colors. Last few things I'm going to do here before I get to my wash step is I'm going to paint the inside of the mouths. A lot of them have their tongues out, so I did a mix of magenta and pink for the tongues, and then once that's dry I come back in with a skeletal bone to paint the teeth and the fangs. So do the inside of the mouths first and then hit the teeth on the outside next, and you should be good. Moving on to our wash step, the whole model is going to get a nice black brown, pretty thin wash over the whole model. The wash is tinting some of the lighter textures we have on the model, but it's not doing a whole lot to our skin because we did a lot of work preemptively. And when we clean the models off, we're going to make sure that we're focusing cleaning the skin above anything else. We can really let the oil stain a lot of our white cloth because we want to make that look dirty, but we don't want to clog up a lot of the detail we worked on with our skin. I have a ton of vehicles, pretty much the same method here, but I'm going to just go from a metallic up. So everything's going to get a coat of black primer. Following the black primer, I'm going to use lead belcher or a dark steel to dry brush the entire mechanical model. That goes for all the vehicles, the walkers, anything that's a machine is going to get this work. This gives us a nice foundation for any kind of metallics going forward, but it also lets us cheat a little bit and not have to paint every single surface of the area. We can keep it this black kind of steel look if we need to. From this metallic base, I'm going to go right to my reds. So again, I'm doing speed, so everything's going to be going from a red. So my reds are going to go from a basilisk red, which is my base coat, and I'm going to paint these panels very similar to the way I paint tanks, where I try to concentrate the paint towards the middle of the armor panels, leaving the edges of the panels and the recesses in between the panels somewhat dark. It gives us a cool highlight effect that we don't have to work really hard for, and when we put our panel lining over it at the end, which for Orks isn't really panel lining, it's more of just like an overall wash, it really comes out nice. And we're going to try to keep this throughout all of the machines, vehicles, stompers, everything, you know, all the vehicles. But basically, when you're building up your color, you want to go smaller and smaller within each panel, every color you go up with. You can do half-step colors, so that means mixing one color with the other before going to the next, or you can just be a little more gentle with your gradient, and you can just go one to the other and kind of do it faster that way also. But we're going to get this really nice vibrant red, which is going to stand out fantastic with the green skin that we have. Two nice vibrant colors. They're not too conflicting. They go well together, and they're really going to pop on the table. It's pretty much right here I'm working on my big ass jet, which is really cool. So I'm just going to cut in all the metallics after this step. So for the jet, there's a lot of stuff that just needs to be hit with like a dark steel. I'm just kind of base coating that stuff, all the missiles and guns. But for the cars, I'm a little more precise with the way I'm doing it. And I'm cutting in the metallics with more bronzes and coppers, trying to be sporadic and make sure I have the colors I need to where I have them. We're going to wash everything down in that same black-brown wash that we saw before. Nothing different. When we come back to a dry model, though, I am going to focus on the armor panels first. And what we're doing here is the same thing that we're doing on the infantry. What I have here is a busted up old brush that's very the bristles are all over the place, and what I'm doing is I'm stippling this super high contrast bloody red paint, which is our highest red, all over the armor panels to give it a splatter effect that like the Orks are just kind of slapping paint on from a distance or throwing paint at it because they're now artists. So that's the goal here, what we're trying to accomplish with this work. Once we're done doing the reds and the splatter effect, we're going to work on the skin a little bit more. Here we're just going to do a quick dry brush of a yellow green or mixed in with lime green, and then we can come back in with our sharp like number 1 or number 0 brush and do some more highlights on the skin for some of the models. You don't have to do every single orc. Usually the dry brush alone will carry a lot of the work that needs to be done. You could focus your brush strokes more on the hero models and their centerpiece models. Once we're done with those 2 nice high contrast colors, we're going to come in and do our rust and grime effects now, because we might do more highlighting later. So what I have here is a few different pigments. I have an old rust, a black, I have some gouache paints, which are really thick water-based acrylics, and I basically just have them on a palette and I'm wet blending all these colors together to give me different rust effects on the model. I'm not covering these models in this rust effect, but I'm just being kind of deliberate on making sure that I have, you know, good placement of the rust at the bottom. If I pool it, I use a rake brush to pull it down and give myself some water streaks. There's a few different techniques here, but mainly I just want to make these guys nice and rusty. That's the goal. Next, we're going to move on to bases. So what I have here is 2 craft paints. I have a black brown and a dark gray, and I have them nice and watered down, and what I'm doing is I'm putting them onto the base, but then I'm coming in with the other color and doing a wet blend. So I'm kind of just slopping this paint all around the bases, being messy, getting it up on the wheels, up on feet, and at the same time what I'm doing is just wet blending the 2 together. Finally, I need to do a nice pigment wash over my bases to give myself kind of like a blasted war zone of the Armageddon feel. So what I have here is I have Old Rust, which is a Vallejo pigment, and I also have some chalk pigment that I've cut into the mix. And what I'm doing here is I have a very watered down pigment wash, and when it dries, it should just keep my pigment there, and it really shouldn't. It should have a dusty feel to it, and then we'll seal it in later with an enamel, or you could seal it in with white spirits too. But when it's a really nice kind of effect, you can really slop it around the bases. You can be deliberate where it is. You can also put it over everything, because since it's just watered down pigment. When it dries, it's going to dry as very sparsely connected pigments on a base, so it's going to look very dusty. I'll do the same technique with a darker pigment as well. So this is an old rust from Vallejo. Same thing, water it down. I added a little bit of black pigment into it to make it even darker. Being a little bit more deliberate with this to give us some definition on the bases, little differences there. But overall, these models, pretty simple scheme in the sense of just a standard like high contrast orc scheme, like orc skin, with a nice high contrast red. The two of them with these really, I think the bases came out really nice. This dry pigment, it's colorful, and it really does work nicely to complement the models. So I think they came out really nice. Pretty simple scheme, but they're pretty effective when it's done over a whole army. And you get the army, you get them together looking, and it really comes out nicely. Anyway, try to keep this one relatively quick. I didn't do anything crazy here, but I think the models look really nice. I like them, especially when they all together, they look fantastic in a large army unit. Cool sculpts. Got some nice stuff coming up on the way. I got some more Magakin, but I have my own custom Minotaur army that I'm doing right now. That'll be up next, so some pretty cool videos to come. If you want to check me out on streaming, I'm streaming. And anyway, thanks for watching and share if you want. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Thanks.